I walked into the library that Sunday afternoon expecting nothing but quiet family time. Just Dad, just family, just the usual calm weekend gathering. My brother Joseph was already there with our father, and he was holding the deed to our family property like he'd just won the lottery. He wasn't smiling sweetly or with any warmth. He was smiling like he'd beaten me at something I didn't even know we were competing in. I think it's time Abigail learns that not everything in life is automatically yours just because you exist, Joseph announced, his voice casual but cutting through the room like a knife. The entire room went completely silent. My mother froze mid-sip of her tea, her hand trembling slightly. My father's eyes dropped to the oak desk in front of him. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just stared at the wood grain like it held all the answers. I felt my stomach drop like I was falling from a building. This wasn't a discussion. This wasn't a family meeting where we'd talk things through. This was a presentation. This was a done deal. Everything had already been decided without me. My hands went cold, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. The property is going to be managed by me going forward, Joseph continued, watching my face like he was savoring every second of my shock and pain. Dad completely agrees it's better this way. For the family. For everyone. My father nodded slowly. Just nodded. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He didn't meet my eyes. That silence was deafening. It told me everything I needed to know about what had happened behind closed doors. It told me he'd already chosen Joseph over me. I forced a smile because I didn't know what else to do. My voice came out steady, but inside something fundamental was shattering. I see, I said quietly, those two words feeling impossibly heavy. That was all I could manage. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of my chair. Joseph grinned wider, enjoying his moment of victory. He thought he'd won. He thought this moment would define the ending of our story. He had absolutely no idea what was coming next. I went home that night and couldn't sleep at all. I replayed the moment over and over, each time making it worse than the last. My father's silence hurt more than Joseph's cruel words ever could. That silence meant he'd already made his decision long before the library meeting. That silence meant I wasn't worth explaining this to. That silence meant he'd chosen to believe my brother over me without hearing my side. At work the next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My coworkers noticed I was distant and withdrawn, staring at my computer screen without reading anything. I made excuses about being tired, about a headache, about family stuff I couldn't talk about. The truth was, I felt completely erased. My entire inheritance, our beautiful family home, the land Dad had promised me since I was a child, the property I'd grown up on, was gone. Just like that. Vanished because my brother had whispered lies into my father's ear, and Dad had believed him instead of me. I started thinking about everything Joseph had done over the years. The small lies that never added up. The way he'd always positioned himself as Dad's favorite, the one who understood business, the one who was responsible. How he'd slowly inserted himself into every financial decision in our family. I'd been so busy living my own life, building my career, that I hadn't noticed the slow betrayal happening right in front of me. I'd been blindsided by someone I'd trusted my entire life. That night, I called my mother with shaking hands. "Why didn't you say anything to me before the meeting? Why didn't you warn me?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "Abigail, it's complicated," she said quietly, her voice small and uncertain. "Your brother convinced your father that you weren't ready for this responsibility. That you needed. That what? That I don't deserve what was promised to me. That I'm not trustworthy." Silence on the line. An awful, telling silence. "Mom, did you know this was coming? Did you know and just not tell me?" She didn't answer. That answer was everything. That answer told me that my own mother had sat with this knowledge and done nothing. That she'd let me walk into a trap. I hung up feeling hollow inside. I'd realized something profound in that moment. Everyone in my family had known except me. I'd been the only one in the dark, walking blindly into a trap of their own making. I couldn't let this go, not because I wanted revenge. I just needed to understand. I needed answers. How had he convinced my father so completely? What had he said? What documents had he shown him? What lies had been so effective that they'd overcome years of promises to me? I started asking questions carefully. Casual questions designed not to tip anyone off to my investigation. I visited Dad on a Saturday afternoon, brought his favorite coffee from the cafe he liked, sat in his study like nothing had changed between us. So, when exactly did you and Joseph decide about the property? I asked gently, trying to sound innocent. How long had you been thinking about this change? Dad shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair, avoiding my eyes. It was a process that took some time, he said vaguely. What kind of process? How long had you been considering this? Weeks. Months. He showed me some documents, financial projections and plans. He said managing it himself would be better for the estate. He said the property taxes were getting out of hand, becoming complicated. Documents. What documents? I'd never seen any documents about property management or tax issues. I started paying attention to details I'd ignored before. I remembered Joseph mentioning paperwork at a family dinner months ago. I remembered him saying something casual about reorganizing the property holdings. At the time I'd thought nothing of it, figured it was just business talk. Now it felt planned, deliberate, like someone had carefully orchestrated a chess match. I asked my Aunt Helen if she'd noticed anything unusual about Joseph's behavior over the past year. She hesitated for a long moment, then said quietly, "Your brother was very persuasive when he talked to your father. He kept saying he was protecting the family's interests. He said you were too young and inexperienced to handle something this valuable." Protecting. That was the word everyone used. But protecting from what? From me. From some danger that didn't even exist. I went home that night and pulled out every document I had access to. The letters from Dad spanning decades. Old emails about the property. I started organizing them chronologically on my bedroom floor, looking for the moment when the plan had started. Looking for the first sign of betrayal. Looking for a thread I could pull. There it was. 6 months ago. An email from Joseph to Dad with the subject line, "Estate planning, important discussion needed." The email I didn't have the content of. The email that had clearly started everything. I hired a lawyer without telling anyone. Not to sue them, just to understand what I was actually looking at. Just to get answers that my family wouldn't give me. Her name was Elena, and she was sharp in a way that made me feel less alone. She was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a no-nonsense demeanor. I brought her copies of every document I could access. She spread them across her desk and studied them carefully, taking detailed notes, comparing signatures with a magnifying glass. "These signatures here," she said finally, pointing to the deed with her pen. "This particular one. Do you have other samples of your father's signature from the same time period?" She looked up at me over her glasses. I did. I'd brought a thick stack of old letters and documents. Elena compared them carefully using magnification tools and years of experience, examining the pressure, the angle, the natural flow of the writing. Her expression changed gradually, shifting from curiosity to concern. "Abigail, I need to ask you something directly and honestly. Did your father sign this deed in front of witnesses? At a notary's office with proper procedure?" "I don't think so. He just said Joseph asked him to sign something." "Why are you asking? What does it mean?" "Because this signature doesn't match his other signatures from this exact same time period. The pressure is completely different. The angle is wrong. The consistency is off. This doesn't look like your father's natural signature at all. This looks like it might have been forged or altered." The room spun. The walls seemed to tilt around me. "What are you saying exactly? Are you saying my brother forged my father's signature?" "I'm saying you need to contact your father directly immediately and ask him if he actually signed this deed. And depending on what he tells you, depending on his answer, we might have a very strong legal case here. We might have evidence of fraud and forgery. I left Elena's office in a complete daze, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. That night I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was forgery. All I could think about was my brother committing an actual serious crime against our own father. I asked my father to meet me at a coffee shop downtown the next day. Neutral territory. A place where we could talk without the weight of family history and expectations pressing down on us. He arrived looking tired, older than I remembered, genuinely confused about why I'd requested an urgent meeting. I carefully pulled out the comparison that Elena had given me. Side by side, the signatures were noticeably and obviously different. "Dad, I need you to look at something very carefully," I said quietly. "And I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Did you actually sign this deed? This original document?" He studied the papers for a long moment. His face went pale as he understood what he was looking at. "I thought I did. Joseph said he needed my signature for some paperwork," he said slowly, his voice uncertain. "But when I look at this now, I'm not sure anymore. What exactly did he tell you it was for? What paperwork did he say he needed your signature on?" My father closed his eyes, trying to remember the exact words. "He said the property taxes were getting very complicated. He said if I gave him power of attorney over the estate, he could manage it all for me. He said it would just be temporary, just until everything was organized and simplified." "Did he show you the document before you signed it? Did he explain what you were signing?" "He said there was a lot of legal language and complicated terminology. He said he'd explain it to me afterward if I had questions. I was busy that day. I was tired. I just signed what he put in front of me without reading it carefully." I reached across the table and took his trembling hand. "Dad, the signature on that deed doesn't match your normal handwriting. It looks like he may have forged it completely, or altered the document after you signed something else. A handwriting expert has confirmed this." My father looked at me, and I saw something break in his face. Not anger directed at me. Shame. Deep, crushing shame that he'd been so easily fooled by his own son. Shame that he'd let Joseph manipulate him so completely. Shame that he'd chosen to believe my brother over me. "What do we do now? How do we fix this?" he asked quietly, his voice small and frightened. "We tell the truth about everything. We go to a lawyer. We do this the right way. We don't hide this. We don't protect him. We let the truth come out completely, no matter where it leads." He nodded slowly, accepting what had to happen next. "Elena helped me file a legal case contesting the deed. Before we filed anything official, though, I needed more evidence. I needed to understand the complete scope of what Joseph had done. My father gave me permission to access all the family trust documents. As I read through the bank statements, looking carefully at dates and amounts, I found something else. Something that made my blood run cold. A massive withdrawal. $200,000 that Joseph had moved from a family account with a notation, for estate management purposes, 6 months ago. The same time he was claiming to need power of attorney. That money was never returned. That money was never explained in any detail. That money had simply vanished into Joseph's personal accounts. I found emails between Joseph and a real estate agent discussing selling parts of the property. Emails dated before my father even knew about the deed change. Emails discussing liquidating assets and simplifying the portfolio. It was absolutely clear. Joseph had never intended for my father to keep this property. He'd intended to sell it and pocket all the proceeds. Each discovery felt like another knife wound. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a mistake born of simple sibling rivalry. This was planned, calculated, deliberate, criminal. I gathered everything in a thick folder and brought it to Elena. My hands trembled as I handed it over to her. "There's more than just the forged deed," I told her, my voice shaking. "There's financial theft. There's attempted fraud. There's misappropriation of family assets. There's everything. Elena reviewed everything with meticulous care, her expression growing more serious with each document. We have a very strong case here. Very strong case indeed. But Abigail, I need to ask you something important. What's your actual goal here? Do you want the property back? Do you want him prosecuted? Do you want him out of the family entirely? Because depending on your answer, our entire legal approach changes. I sat with that question for a long time, thinking deeply. I thought about revenge. I thought about justice. I thought about my family. I thought about what would actually heal this wound and bring peace. I want the truth to come out, I finally said. I want my father to understand fully what happened. And I want Joseph to face real consequences for what he did. Real legal consequences. Okay then, Elena said, closing the folder. We do this legally, carefully, and completely. We do this the right way. Before we filed anything officially, before we made this public in any way, I decided to give Joseph one chance to come clean. Maybe he'd have a sudden change of heart. Maybe he'd realize how far he'd gone and try to fix it. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon. My heart pounded as the phone rang. His voice was instantly defensive, like he'd been expecting this call. What do you want, Abigail? We need to talk about the deed. About all of it. There was a pause. I could almost hear him calculating, deciding which lie to deploy. I know you forged Dad's signature. Have a lawyer. Have evidence. A handwriting expert has reviewed everything. The bank records show the missing funds. I'm giving you the chance to come clean before I file charges. There was a long pause. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, cruel laugh. You don't know anything, Abigail. And you can't prove anything. Your lawyer will waste everyone's time. I can prove it. And I am. Good luck, he said and hung up. I didn't feel victorious. Felt sad. Heartbroken even. He could have told the truth. He could have explained. He could have made this right. Instead, he chose to double down on the lie. Elena filed the case quietly. It was a quiet filing with no drama. No public exposure. No social media post. Just the legal system doing what it was designed to do. Within a week, Joseph received notice. He tried to contact me, his voice suddenly soft and sorry. Abigail, we can work this out. This doesn't need to destroy the family. But it was too late. No, we're going to court. The truth is coming out. Discovery was brutal. Joseph's emails, financial records, everything had to be produced. I read email chains where he'd discussed his plans. I saw his excitement about the profit he'd make. My father testified. His testimony was clear and truthful. I did not authorize any deed transfer. My son did that without my permission. Case moved slowly. Months passed. I went to therapy, which helped me understand that this was about justice, not revenge. My therapist helped me see that justice and revenge were fundamentally different. Justice is about accountability and truth. Revenge is about wanting someone to hurt as much as you do. Abigail, she would say during our sessions, you can pursue truth without bitterness. You can stand up for yourself without becoming someone you don't recognize in the mirror. I attended sessions twice a week, sometimes breaking down in tears as I talked about my father's silence and Joseph's calculated cruelty. But slowly, week by week, I felt stronger. My relationship with my parents slowly healed during this time. They started believing me completely, without hesitation. They started including me in family decisions again. They listened to me when I spoke. I received messages from Joseph that ranged from pleading to angry. He tried to convince me to drop the case. But I didn't respond to any of it. I just forwarded everything to Elena. The court date arrived exactly 1 year after that awful day in the library. I wore a simple blue dress. Just myself. Just the truth. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. Just a woman who'd been wronged, seeking justice. The courtroom was cold and formal. The judge was stern. She listened with intense focus as Elena presented the evidence. The handwriting expert testified about the differences in the signatures. The bank statements were presented showing the missing funds. The emails were read aloud, showing Joseph's intent and planning. My father testified on a Tuesday morning. He was nervous, his hands shaking. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. I did not authorize any deed transfer. My son did that without my permission or knowledge. The judge asked him probing questions. He answered honestly. He took responsibility for not reading the documents carefully. Joseph's lawyer tried desperately to create doubt. He tried to suggest alternative explanations for the signatures. But there were no alternatives. The facts were too clear. The evidence was overwhelming. Walking out of the courthouse, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. My father hugged me outside. "I'm sorry it took a court case for me to believe you," he said. "You believe me now. That's what matters," I told him. My mother was waiting in the car. She cried when we got in. Tears of relief that the truth had finally come out. Tears of gratitude that justice had been served. The local news wanted to cover the story. It had all the elements of a scandal. A son forging his father's signature, stealing family property, trying to cheat his sister out of her inheritance. "No," I told them firmly. "We're not discussing this publicly. This is private. This is family. This is something we need to heal from, not broadcast." I was protecting my family's dignity. There's a difference between justice and spectacle. Joseph tried to appeal the court's decision. It was a last desperate attempt to overturn the ruling, to prove that the judge had made a mistake, to reclaim some version of victory. His new lawyer presented arguments about procedural errors, about bias, about mishandled evidence. The appeal was denied completely. The Court of Appeals agreed with Judge Morrison. The evidence was too clear. The ruling was sound and based on facts, not emotion. He faced criminal charges for the forgery and theft. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal with the prosecutor. He pled guilty to fraud and forgery. He received probation and was required to pay full restitution to my father's estate over a period of 5 years. It wasn't prison time. But it was consequence. It was accountability. It was the legal system saying officially and permanently, "What you did was wrong. It was breaking the law. It was a crime." In the months after the verdict, I started understanding why Joseph had done it. My therapist helped me see. Joseph had always felt like he was competing with me. He believed I had advantages he didn't. He thought Dad loved me more. Instead of talking about those feelings, he let them fester into resentment and then into crime. It was sad. But I couldn't fix that. He had to choose to fix it himself. 3 months after the verdict, my father called me to his office. The very same room where this had all started. The place where my brother had announced his theft like it was a victory. The place where my father had stayed silent instead of defending me. "I've been thinking about the property," my father said carefully. "I've been thinking about what it means and what it should mean. I want to put it in both our names. Yours and mine. Together. I want you to own it with me during my lifetime, not just inherit it after I'm gone." I looked at him, surprised by the completeness of his gesture. "Dad, you don't have to do that. The court already." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Because you deserve to inherit this house. Not because a judge said so. Because I'm your father, and I promised it to you long ago when you were a child. I should never have let anyone convince me otherwise. I should have trusted you from the beginning." I hugged him tightly. "Okay, Dad. Okay." That gesture meant more to me than the legal victory. It meant my father was truly choosing me, truly believing in me, truly making things right. My mother asked me to have coffee. I knew Joseph was lying. But I was afraid. I should have spoken up. I should have protected you instead of staying silent. "I'm sorry, Abigail. Thank you for telling me that," I said. "That takes courage." 6 months after the verdict, Joseph sent me a letter. Not an email. Not a text message. A handwritten letter, which somehow felt more genuine and more personal than any digital communication could be. I almost didn't open it, but something made me. Some part of me needed to know what he would say. He wrote that he was in therapy, that he was trying to understand why he'd done what he did, that he knew an apology couldn't fix anything, but he wanted to offer one anyway. He wrote that he'd resented me his entire life, that every success I had felt like a failure on his part, that forging the deed had felt in his mind like finally evening the score, like finally getting what should have been his. He wrote that he now understood how broken that thinking was, how much damage he'd caused, how he'd hurt not just me but our parents too, how he'd destroyed trust in our entire family. He wrote that he didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that he understood what he'd done, that he was taking responsibility, that he was trying to change, that he was paying his restitution faithfully every month. I read that letter 3 times. I cried when I read it the first time. I felt anger when I read it the second time. I felt sadness when I read it the third time. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I kept the letter. I put it in a drawer where I could find it if I ever needed to remember that people can change. That understanding can come even after terrible mistakes. A year after the verdict, I stopped thinking about it every day. 2 years after, I started to heal completely. I didn't forgive Joseph, but I stopped hating him. I stopped wishing bad things would happen. I lived my life. I worked. I saw friends. I spent time with my parents. Grew. The house became mine officially. I renovated the kitchen. I planted a garden. I made it mine. 3 years after the court case, I ran into Joseph at the grocery store on a random Tuesday afternoon. We both froze when we saw each other, recognizing each other immediately across the produce section. The air between us felt thick and complicated. Then we nodded at each other, acknowledging the awkwardness, the history, the complicated space between us. He looked different, smaller, less certain, less like someone who had everything figured out. He looked like someone who'd spent years facing himself in the mirror and didn't like what he saw. He looked humbled. "Hi," he said quietly. His voice was almost uncertain. "Hi," I replied. "I'm glad you got the house," he said. "I'm glad you got what was yours." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. "I'm sorry," he added. "I know that's 3 years too late, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." "I know," I said. "And I'm glad you understand why what you did was wrong." We didn't hug. We didn't exchange phone numbers. We didn't make plans to get coffee and catch up. We didn't try to rebuild our relationship or pretend that time would heal this wound. But we didn't hate each other in that moment either. We were just 2 siblings who'd been broken by something and were trying to figure out how to move forward separately. I'd won the legal battle. I'd gotten the house back. I'd gotten my inheritance back. My parents had come around and understood what had happened. The truth had been vindicated in a court of law. But I'd lost my brother. That was the price of the truth. That was the cost of justice. For a long time I resented having to pay that price. I felt like I should get everything. The house, the money, and a healthy relationship with Joseph. I felt like the universe owed me that. I felt like I'd already sacrificed so much by standing up for myself. But that's not how it works. Sometimes truth comes at a cost. Sometimes the people we love make choices that break our relationships beyond repair. Sometimes standing up for yourself means losing the people you're standing up against. I had to accept that loss. I had to grieve it. I had to understand that justice and reconciliation aren't always possible in the same story. But I gained something valuable. Something a house could never be worth. I gained clarity about my family. I gained the knowledge that my parents would believe me, that they would choose truth over comfort. I gained understanding that I could stand up for myself, that the truth was powerful enough. I gained a stronger relationship with my parents built on honesty. I gained respect for myself. People ask if I regret taking legal action. My answer is always the same. I don't regret telling the truth. What I learned is that revenge isn't about getting even. Revenge is letting someone else's actions define your response. Revenge eats you from inside. Justice is about standing in the truth and letting the system do its job. Justice is about accountability without bitterness. Chose justice, and that choice set me free. It's been 5 years now since that day in the library. My relationship with Joseph is cordial but distant. We see each other at family gatherings. We're polite. We don't pretend to be close. My parents understand and accept this boundary. They don't force reconciliation. Joseph has built a life for himself. He's paying restitution regularly. He's doing better financially. He's in a stable relationship. He's working through his issues. I'm genuinely glad for those things. I've made the family home my own. Not out of spite. Out of love. I've restored the gardens my grandmother planted decades ago. I've updated the kitchen. I've filled the rooms with people I love and memories worth keeping. Sometimes I think about how Joseph almost took this from me. Almost erased my claim to something that was always meant to be mine. But he didn't. Because I chose to fight truthfully and legally for what was right. That feels like victory. I don't think about revenge anymore. Revenge has lost its power over me. What he did was wrong. He's facing consequences. And he understands why. I've learned that the best revenge is living well. Building a good life. Maintaining your integrity. The best revenge is knowing you handled an impossible situation with honesty. And you can look at yourself in the mirror without shame. I look at myself now and see someone strong. Someone who was tested and chose truth. Someone who could have become bitter but chose to move forward with grace. My brother tried to steal my inheritance. But what he actually taught me was something worth far more. That integrity matters. That truth matters. That the quiet, legal, honest path is more powerful than any revenge could ever be. The family home is mine now. But more importantly, my peace of mind is mine. My sense of self is intact. My relationships are built on honesty. I earned all of that the right way. And that's the real victory. That's the real inheritance. And that's something no one can ever take from me.